Welcome again, YouTube. So, I have got my 89 Camaro, and it desperately needs new, well, brake everything. In this video I'm going to be doing pretty much an entire brake job. I've got new calipers, brake pads, rotors, bearings. I'm going to do everything on the front in this video, and then I'm going to move on to the back in my next video. So, first things first, let's find a point on the front of the car and jack it up. Okay, so I got the car jacked up on both sides, and I just took the lug nuts off. Now I need to take the tire off. And that's what you get when you take the tire off. And from what you can see from mine, my rotors are completely shredded, and from the pads, they're not all the way down, but it looks like someone went all the way down to the metal, shredded that, and just put new brake pads on. Plus, I seem to be missing something. So, yeah, first things first, let's take this dust cap off, and I'm going to take a flathead screwdriver and put it in between here and hit it with a hammer, and it should pop out. Alright, there we go. I got the dust cap off, and got all the fancy little grease in there. Just another thing you're going to need for this job is a lot of towels to be cleaning up grease, especially if you're doing the bearings. So let me clean this up. Alright, now that I've cleaned that up a little bit, you're going to see a cotter pin in here. Now either you can cut that out or bend the bottoms so they're straight again and pull it out. Whatever works. It's best if you have a new cotter pin to put in there anyway, so it doesn't matter if you do cut it. So let's take that out. Alright, so now that I got that cotter pin out, I'm going to be using a crescent wrench to take out this castle nut. This castle nut should not be really tight on there, so this shouldn't be too hard to loosen up and take off. Alright, now that that castle nut is off, I turned the wheel to the right hand side so it's easier to access this and this bolt. These two are going to be going all the way through. That's what's keeping your caliper in place, and that is going to be a 3/8 Allen head. And I didn't have any special tools, so I just had these lying around, and if I turn my wheel this way, the 3/8 will fit in here. And once I get it in there, you can use your crescent wrench and pop it on there, and that's how I got mine off. But if you got a proper tool, I suggest using the proper tool. Alright, finally got this dude off. This caliper really did not want to come off. I don't know if you can see it too well. I'll show you in better light, but the grooves on these brake pads went with the grooves that are in here. Whew! It gave me a struggle, but it's supposed to pull straight out. If I can put it back on here like this, it just pulls straight out. Hopefully yours isn't this far gone when you're doing it and it's not a struggle. So I'm going to put this off to the side for now. I'm going to hang it up back here so I'm not putting any strain on the brake line. Okay, so now that the caliper is off, we can get back to the greasy. So this is just a washer, so this is going to come out, but right there where that little dab of grease is right here is a little notch, so that's going to go in the notch here. Hold on to this unless you have a replacement, obviously, but hold on to this. This is going to go back on once you do the bearings, if you are doing the bearings. And once that's out, now we need to take the bearing out. Now the third generation, I'm guessing it's along with other GM models and other models, you're going to have an inner bearing and an outer bearing. Now this bearing right here is really easy to pop out. All you have to do is really wiggle the caliper, or not the caliper, the rotor, which has probably already been done by now. There you go. It falls out. Try to leave that hanging there. and this is what you're going to have. Now the way it goes in when we put it back in is like this, the smaller end going towards the inside. So this bearing doesn't look too bad, but I got a new set and they don't cost too much, so I'm going to put this off to the side and take this off so we can get the other bearing out. Now here's your inner bearing. This is how I have the rotor put down. That's your inner bearing, and it does not fall out easily. So there are different ways to take this out. There are certain tools that you can put in there and pop out, even just using tools that aren't supposed to be for it, like I've seen someone use a crowbar to put in there and pop it out. All it is putting it in between there and just wiggling it out. And another one that I saw was putting it back on here and putting the castle nut on and pulling it out. So whatever you want to do, I haven't done this before, so I am going to try popping it out using some kind of tool, maybe some pliers to pop it out. Alright, so I was able to get this thing popped out. I was just using some piece of pliers and it just popped out. I'm not reusing these, so a different method might work better for you if you are reusing them. But this is what it's called that goes in. It just sits in there, and that's how it's placed. I'm going to set that off to the side, and then we have the inner bearing. So that is how you take those out, and now I'm going to be cleaning off this whole piece. Once I'm done cleaning this whole thing off, then I can put all my new parts back on. And because I'm in here doing a brake job, I'm also going to be doing the calipers. And if anyone here is just doing brake pads, then you can easily take the brake pad, the old ones out, and put the new ones back in there. You'd have to take it out. I'll show you on my new one, but you'll have to take it out and clamp down the piston in here that pushes these together. So you have to reset that, push it back in. But I'm going to take this thing out and put in a new one, which is actually very simple. All you need to do is detach the whole caliper set from the brake line. So I'm going to take this out and pop the new one back in. Alright, and this little bolt that goes in here is an 11mm. So when I back this out, just be prepared, obviously, for some brake fluid. So have a pan or something underneath to catch it, and just make sure that it doesn't bleed your brakes completely dry. So there's always going to be some fluid in your master cylinder, unless you want to do an entire brake bleed, which you don't. But you're going to have to do a little bit of a bleed when you put the new calipers back on anyway, because there'll be air in there. Alright, so I pretty much have everything set up now. I just wanted to show you guys what I was doing. How I have this set up right here is how I have my new one set up. So orientation is the same way. So as soon as I take that off, I can screw this one back on as soon as possible, so, you know, not to waste any brake fluid. So I have it the same way, and I've already got one of the copper washers on here, and once I take this one off and put that one back on, there's two. So I have the other one over here, because one goes on one side and one goes on the other side. One goes up against here, and then one goes onto the actual banjo bolt that's in there, so it's going to slide on, and then you'll have these on both sides. So let me go ahead and pop this out real quick so you guys can see that. So here's the banjo bolt that comes out. So I'm going to be taking that copper washer and putting it on the bolt, and now that it's on there, I can put that onto the new one that I have sitting over here in the same orientation that it has right there on what I currently have pinched off on here. And there we go, there's the new one in. And after you do one, go ahead, get back up to your master cylinder, make sure it's not low, fill it up with a little bit to make sure it's back at the correct level before you do any of the other ones, And now we got to put the brake pads in. Alright, so I got my new brake pads. So the one with the lip, if you are doing a Camaro. If you don't, then just go off your old one. If you do have the 3rd generation Camaro, go, and this one pops up on here, but I'm going to put that one in last, just because the way I have it oriented, it will fall out. And the second one is like this. This clip right here is going to go on the left hand side like that, and the back is the clip that goes inside the piston here. It's for basically to keep it in place. If you don't have the one that's on here, use the clip on your old one. If it's still good, it should still be good, and brake pad, the new brake pad should come with a new one regardless, even if it has one on here. I have 2 now, so I'm gonna pop that one in there, pop the new one back in, and we'll get back to the rest of our brake job. So the next step is to grease. So I've got my high temp wheel bearing grease. Stuff is pretty much good for anything. Get your grease, grease along the shaft here, because that's where all your moving parts are going to be on. You're going to get some grease and go around the inside of, or if you have a new one, go around the inside so you have new grease in there. If you do have your old one, clean out all the old grease and put in new grease, and then we will get our new bearings. Or if you have old bearings, it's the same process. If you have old bearings, you want to try to get as much as the old grease out as you can and put in as much new grease that will push out all the old grease. So you can either have a little machine that does it for you, where you just press it and all the grease goes through these grooves, or if you want to do it by hand, you have to push all the grease through this little slit right here until it starts coming out on the other side, and then you have to coat it around the edges where all these rollers are. Once you get that done, then you can seat it in here and put your seal on. Alright, so I put a decent amount of grease in there and up here. Now that I actually have to do the bearing itself, I've got a glob of grease in my hand, and I'm going to grab the bearing and I'm going to smush it in my hand. And the idea is to get your bearing and smush it up in that little crevice, like I said, like this, and just keep going along and doing this until you start noticing the grease coming up on the other side, on the inside. And then do that all the way around, get all the outside, and then you can place it in there. Alright, now that the bearings have been placed in there, I'm going to get my seal, lube it up, and put it in, and then I'm going to use my bearing race and seal driver set. You can get these at any of your local auto parts stores that do a Lona tool. It's basically circular things that you can put something like that into, and it's a screw at the end, and you just figure out what size you want that goes around here perfectly, and you hammer it into place. You use that so you don't have to tap in the sides and possibly damage it. So let me go ahead and seat that in. Alright, now that I got this hammered into place, you can see the bottom there. Now that I have that hammered into place, this whole thing's flush. I'm going to get some grease and put it around the edges in here. Pretty much glob grease everywhere, just because. Now that you're done with that, you get to take your rotor and put it back on so we can do the next bearing. Okay, so I got the rotor put on there, and it's just kind of hanging in place right now, but that's fine. And what I did for the inner bearing, I'm going to do for the outer bearing with the grease. Just smush it up through here until you see it pop through the grooves, give it some turns, coat the outside, and then you're going to put it in, like I said in the beginning of the video. It's going to be The tapered end is going to go in like so, and when you do that, then you can put on the washer. It's going to go in the little groove right there, so that little nub's going to go in, and once we put that on, then we can get our castle nut back on. And there it is. Now that I have it pushed in, I'm going to put the washer in now. And once that washer's in, I can put the castle nut on. And once I get the castle nut on and I get my crescent wrench back on here, you're not supposed to tighten this up really, really tight. They say the general rule is supposed to be 1 to 2 turns, depending on the vehicle, of the rotor free spin when you push it. And the tighter that you have this, the less that this is going to spin, and the looser that you have it, the more it's going to wobble back and forth like that, which is not what we want. So let me get my crescent wrench and I'll start tightening this. So give it some spins. It's still loose, so we'll spin it some more. Still loose, and it's good to spin this around, but I don't have 2 hands at the moment, so I'm just generally spinning this around. Now we've got a tiny bit left. Let me get a few more spins in here. There we go. Now it's not wobbling anymore. So now I got about a spin. So let me get 2 hands back and let me get this right, make sure it's not wobbling anywhere, and spin it a few times to kind of get the bearings greased up all the way, and we'll see where we're at. Alright, so I tightened it up a little bit more, and I popped a lug nut on here. It's a lot easier to tell when you spin it. So if I start right here and I really torque down and I spin it, it goes about 1 1/2, 1 1/4 when I do spin it, and that's where I want it. So now that this is in place, I can put the cotter pin in, and just try to remember where the holes are for the cotter pin. I've got one, I'm using the one on the top, which means there's one on the bottom, and for this Camaro there's also another one that goes in through the side. So you have 2 places to put in a cotter pin, just in case you want it a little bit tighter, a little bit looser, and you don't have to go to a whole nother ring. So I'm going to put the cotter pin in and bend it so it doesn't move. Cotter pin in there. I bent the bottom down a little bit, so now that that's not going to pop out, I can get my dust cover and put my dust cover back on. So I got the dust cover back on. Now I definitely need to clean the rotor. I've got smudges and a bunch of stuff on there, plus it's still got a little bit of machining metal still around the hole. So I'm gonna get my brake cleaner and go around and make sure this thing looks nice and new. And after it's been cleaned, you can put the rotor back on. So I have it back in. The brake pad on this side is obviously going to be flush up against this side, and the other one, that's kind of how it sits in. It goes in between the groove here with that little notch on the top. So now that it is seated correctly, we can go ahead and put our little rod pistony doohickey maneuver boopers back in. Alright, and there it is. I clean this up a little bit because I have some greasy spots on it. So that's everything put back together with the new kit put on. Now I just need to put the wheel on, but I can't do that yet because, well, I do need to do the other side, but it's the exact same process. I don't need to show you guys the same process over again. But cannot forget that you need to bleed the brake lines. So that's the last thing that I'm gonna do, but first I need to do the other side, and I also need to check and make sure my master cylinder is topped off, since I did this one and I had some drips. So that's what I'm gonna do. Alright, so I'm gonna be bleeding the brakes. I've got a clear hose that goes into the back, right back here. And the hose goes into the nipple where this was over. That's going to go on there. And I've got a wrench on here right now. And you need to have 2 people. And one person is going to be in the car pressing the brake, and the other person is going to be down here dealing with this. Have something for the brake fluid to fall into. So you're going to have the person brake, and they're going to push down on the brake pedal, and then what you're going to do is once they push down, you're going to turn this so it loosens up, and that'll make it free flowing, and then you'll have them release and tighten it back up, and then repeat that over and over, and sooner or later you'll finally get fluid flowing through here. And once you get a solid stream without any kind of bubbles, then that's how you know you're good. So that's what I've done. Now I gotta take everything apart here, go back up top to the master cylinder and top that bad boy off, and that's it for the front brakes. Next is the rear brakes. Honestly, I have no idea why this stuff is not on YouTube, but I hope this helps you guys out. Anyone that has these cars or has used this as a project car, and maybe this is something you need to do. Maybe this is something you have done, you're an expert in, and you'd like to leave comments down below to help people out. This is my first time doing it, but if you have something to tell people that would help out, maybe some sizes of different wrenches or whatever, or things to go around, yeah, that'd be helpful for everyone else. I'm gonna put the wheels back on here and show you what it looks like.